Hello and welcome once again to Talking Pictures Podcast. I'm your host David and joined with me as always my co-host Brian. Brian, how are you today?
I'm wearing shorts.
You're wearing shorts in the middle of August on a rainy day.
I remember September being very hot.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a shitty kind of summer this year. I don't know if you found that.
Summer?
Yeah. Well, what summer? Yeah.
Fucking lack thereof, buddy.
And before we get into it, I just want to remind everyone that we're available on all podcasting platforms. So wherever you prefer to get your podcasts, we're available on it. We're also available on YouTube. And just make sure to subscribe on all our social media platforms. All the links down below. All the links are down below anyway in the description. But
Letterboxd, LinkedIn, Instagram,
everywhere,
Twitter.
all the most famous social medias like LinkedIn, we're on there.
We're even on the YouTube.
On everything. But yeah, before we jump into our main topic, Brian, have you got a trailer of the week for us?
No, let's go on to the main topic.
Okay, brilliant. So we're going to be talking about a series, not something that we usually talk about. We talk about usually films, but
we are a film and TV podcast.
Yes, we are reminded once a year that, oh shit, yeah, we have to do TV shows.
Time to live up to that standard.
So with the end of the Umbrella Academy happening there in the last week or two?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. We said now is probably the best time to talk about it, considering it's fresh in everyone's minds.
3 weeks, actually.
3 weeks. We're coming at it from an interesting perspective, though.
2 different perspectives, I'd say.
2 very different perspectives. You have been watching it since
2019.
Since it first came out. Whereas I watched it in the run-up to the newest season coming out. Now, I wouldn't say that I binged it, even though technically I did binge it. I watched it 1 episode a day. So it wasn't like I was sat down and like watching episode after episode after episode. I limited myself to
That's
it.
a healthy binge.
I'm gonna watch 1 episode a day, and I'm gonna sit with it, and I'm gonna anticipate the next episode.
Yes.
And I wouldn't ever like, oh, I need to watch the next one right now.
You're not gonna cram it all in. You're gonna let it marinate, let it sizzle. You know, ponder.
I think that whole binging model is just too. It's just nearly like everything becomes a checklist and you want to get everything off it rather than actually enjoying it. Even though you are enjoying it so much that you have to get to the next one, everything just kind of bleeds together. So
you'd forget about it an awful lot more quickly. It's like dropping all episodes at once, and then it's forgotten about the following 2 weeks where
there's no staying power to it. Yeah. So I think that is an interesting way to look at it, that you've been with this for 4 years. I've been with this a month. In a lot of ways, you're like a lot of the members of the Umbrella Academy, and I'm a bit like 5, where it's all just happening all at once. But yeah, what did you? So when it first came out, you want to talk a little bit about its inception, its start?
In 2019, before Avengers Endgame, it came out in February. And I was still relatively new to watching TV shows on a serious level, because I've watched some TV shows. I think 2019 was the early phase of when I started watching TV shows as much as movies. And I don't think I paid attention too much of the trailers. I've seen them, yes, because in the one trailer, 5 goes to Klaus. Come on, we gotta go. Where are we going? To save the world. Oh, is that all? I remember that catching my attention, plus Robert Sheehan from Love Hate fame being in this, and at the time Ellen Page, now Elliot Page, in the show, some attention grabbing for myself. And then Tom Hopper, who plays Luther, he played Dickon Tardy in Game of Thrones. And so all these familiar faces and an interesting story, but yet not something you'd expect. You'd have to watch the show to fully get what you're in for. And so I started to watch the show, and I remember liking it and not knowing what to compare it to. I could say I can compare it to the likes of Doom Patrol and The Boys as some of the best superhero-based TV shows that are not even direct Marvel or direct DC.
Yeah.
You know, they're all their own standalone comics. I know Doom Patrol is DC, but it was completely separate from anything.
I get you. It's removed from any kind of main universe or main tie-ins or anything like that. Yeah, it can stand on its own.
So I did enjoy it. I think the help of listening to a fellow YouTuber to discuss the show was my in to help deconstruct what was happening, to take it all in, because I like to listen to reviews of stuff. It helps me get invested into some stuff and be reminded of things. So I loved it. I really liked it. And I think I remember when the first season ended on that cliffhanger when they travel back in time in the end of the world. I'm thinking, I'm hooked. I want to see what's next. And how grateful it was nice at the time during COVID to get the second season a year and a few months later. The first season came out in February 2019. The second season came out in July 2020, and immediately thrusted into it. And how best to tell a story with these characters? We now know what they are like, what we've established them to be as estranged siblings who were raised to be superheroes, but are definitely not up to the par of the Justice League or the Avengers. They're like similar to, well, they're not worse than Hancock with that, like Will Smith, but they're just, it's like what the boys are, the Seven, but except they're not assholes. You know, they're honest people with issues, daddy issues, familial issues,
that just so happen to have superpowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If anything, the fact that they have superpowers is not the main draw. You don't actually get major action sequences of these superpowers, especially to the full potential. It's a plot aspect to them.
A lot of their superpowers wouldn't feed into
the main story.
Well, wouldn't feature much in a big battle. Like we get at the very start of season 2 when 5 finally comes to the past.
Yeah.
And you see all of them working in tandem together. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much it in terms of seeing them in a big battle sequence using their powers.
Yeah.
Whereas throughout the series, it's their powers that kind of drive the plot forward and move in different interesting ways.
You see, here's what I think about 5 being able to teleport and transport to time. That pushes forward the story. When he time travels, it pushes forward the story of the overall series. When he teleports to get from one location to the next, it's effective, but it's also just convenient for him to be in places to get access to something and to also be capable of mass murder. And that's the same with Allison using her rumor. Sometimes with Klaus and what they want to do with him, with the dead, that's very effective and impactful to the overall story. And then with Vanya as well, or in the later seasons, Victor being the cause of 2 of the 4 apocalypses per season. It's all pushing forward the story, but they're necessary. Say Luther, for example. Every time he is doing hand-to-hand combat, fighting someone, he's no different than what are the 2 assassins in the first season?
Oh, Cha-Cha and
Hazel.
Hazel, yes.
When Luther is fighting Hazel, it's fairly balanced out. It's an evened match. When he's fighting Diego sometimes, it's evened out. Luther has the body of a gorilla, but that's as a result of being injected with the same genes of Pogo, the talking, wise, thinking chimpanzee butler. But that's in appearance only. He's not strong. He's not like Mr. Incredible. He's indestructible.
Yes.
He can take on a bazooka. He can take on bullets. He's indestructible. He is invincible. But in terms of his strength, like, yeah, he can punch. He can give a good hard punch to a statue and make it fall.
But he's not Superman levels of strong or...
No, like he can take on Diego and Hazel. Like, and I'm thinking, is he even really all that effective in a fight? Like 5 can't take him on because he's short, but that's an issue I have, but not one that defines my opinion of it, because I'm not watching the show for their powers. I'm watching this show because of these characters as siblings and who they are. I love just seeing them bicker and argue and fight on screen and then come together in emotional scenes of dialogue and the various adventures they get themselves into. And that's why I think season 2 is my favourite, because when I was saying how great it was to set up the second season after establishing who these characters are, why don't you have them all fall into the same alley but at different points of time? So Klaus and of course Ben, because Ben is as a ghost has to be with Klaus at all times, so it's a nice companion pair to see, because everyone else is on their own, so they have to generate their own stories. So Klaus and Ben arriving 3 years before the apocalypse, and then who was the 2 year Allison? I think 1 year was Luther, and then within that year we shrink down to Diego, and then Vanya at the time, and then 5. And I'm watching this sequence, and I watched it recently. Klaus and Ben have been in this time period, 1966 66, 67 for
64.
64, 3 years. And then everyone has been there. They built their own lives. And it sets the overall arc for that season, and I really love that how Five just landed here at the tail end of it. Well, I'd like to talk about the characters individually and who they are.
Let's do that. Yeah, I agree with you. I like that they were all separated.
Yeah,
and I like that all of them, most of them, I'd say, were better off when they were separated and not together, and they were living their own lives with Klaus and his cult, and Alison was married, and Luther was working at the bar, wasn't he? He was a bouncer.
He was the bouncer, bodyguard, driver for the real life gangster who killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't pick up on that at all.
Jack Ruby, that's the real life guy. So he's the guy who killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
But then as soon as Five comes in, it's like, even though it is Vanya who starts the apocalypse, it feels like Five is always bringing the apocalypse with them. Like he's transporting it to wherever they're going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to actually go through them each individually
as characters, not necessarily the arcs they go through.
No, I think if we go through, so starting with Luther, you obviously spoke a little about Luther. I really like Luther in that he, like you said there, he has the by consequence of his dad experimenting on him, he has the body of a gorilla.
Yeah.
And he has the kind of the complex of being number one, that he's the leader, and so he should be the kind of strongest. But also then he has kind of this body dysmorphia, and that he is self-conscious about his own body.
Yeah.
And like they kind of say it throughout the season, or through, I think maybe season 1 and 2, where he's wearing the big jackets and the big shirts and like
to hide
nearly try to hide it. And Five even calls him out. I was like, nobody, you're not fooling anyone, like. Or I think maybe there's jokes even like, oh, Luther, you look a little smaller, and he like literally like brightens up or something like that. And so I really like that, of like having a character who is supposed to be
the leader, the brave leader, the confident one,
being in a way the kind of weakest in terms of how they see themselves.
I liked Luther because of that element, because of what he sees as his deformity, and what he later realizes that he was sent to the moon just to
busy work, just to get him out of not so Reg didn't have to look at him anymore.
He was assigned to be the leader of the team, and he was the last one there, and he was still there executing the missions because he's the type of guy who wants to be the hero that he's perceived to be. He looks at the Sparrow Academy, and that's what he wants.
Yes.
And when he's asked, "Aren't you their leader?" by Sloane, he's like, "Oh no, I'm not leading these guys anymore. We're not a team at all. We're a completely awful, dysfunctional team. We're not good at all." And
well, they're not a team in the same way the Sparrows are. If I look at the Sparrows and I look at the Umbrella, the Sparrows are a team, whereas the Umbrellas are a family.
Well,
I feel like
said
they are much more of a dysfunctional family, but a family nonetheless. Like consistently throughout all 4 seasons, they refer to each other as their brothers and their sisters.
Yeah.
So I think that is far better than the way that the Sparrows were.
Yeah, the Sparrows were introduced, and I thought originally they were going to be an entire seasoner, but
they were picked off throughout the season.
Yeah.
But they were also kind of cutthroat in like all of them wanted to be number one, or they would get a leg up on someone else if it meant their standing was higher.
That was never really the case with these guys. These guys, the Umbrella Academy, didn't want to be superheroes.
No.
I hated Luther when he put Vanya in the vault.
Yes, so did I. Yeah,
I he was the one who made that decision, that executive decision on behalf of the team.
Mm-hmm. I hated him when he hugged her.
Yeah,
when he
was suffocating her to smother her to sleep, make her unconscious,
because she was there and she was just having an embrace of a hug with her brother and was apologizing and saying, I'm sorry that happened, all this, and she thought that she was safe with him, and then he hugs her, and then she's in the vault, and she's like, oh no, Luther, come on, please.
And there's just the opposite thing of what the leader should be doing. Mm-hmm. Like, he accuses the team of one of them killing the father, and like he wants to be, like I said, he wants to be that team leader to lead. He wants to be the Superman of the Justice League.
Yeah,
but he's not capable of doing it.
Not with this team. Not with these people.
But it feels like he gave up when he just resorted to just fighting and living the low life in season 2. And I still hated him for what he did to Vanya. But when he came to apologise to her, but she had no memory of it, I really appreciated that development. And And then he became a bit of a buffoon.
He did, especially I think in season 3.
It started in season 3, and he seemed to be the guy with a lot of heart, a little bit naive. He's just started about to love the idea of having Reg return to him as his father. And even though I know he's not gone for sure, I felt his death when it happened.
Yeah.
Like when Reginald killed him. That's one case to show that he's number one, but he was the most expendable. And even more so in season 4, some people might say he's downgraded, but I think it's still in part of his character to gain his confidence again, if anything, and be a stripper. And when he's the astronaut, still with that theme, he's stripping. And I actually thought he looked great. I was happy that he was normal again. He didn't have to grill a body. But when he got his powers back,
it's funny because like you're saying there, right, that he got his confidence back to become a stripper, but he wasn't very, like, he wasn't enthusiastic about it, and his age was kind of catching up to him. And then when he gets his powers back and he gets that body back, he gets the full kind of confidence of it, until he rips off the shirt and he sees it again, and then he gets self-conscious again about it, and he stops becoming the stripper. And
at this point, he's the guy who loves to take the photos of the family. He's there to be with Ben, even though it's not their Ben. You know, he's naively happy, a little bit delusional. But I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's the one with the biggest heart in the end of it all.
I think so too. I think he learned from his mistakes in how to deal with Vanya.
Yeah.
So as the seasons progress, especially with 3 and 4, he puts family first, I think.
Yeah, I really did. I liked him in the end. I liked them all in the end.
Oh, I like them all. Yeah, no,
there's no one in that family I don't like in the conclusion of it. But another complicated character is number 2, Diego.
I think Diego is probably, for me, the weakest character, and by that I don't mean that he is he's probably my least favorite character, just because I like everyone else so much more. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing I don't like about Diego. It's just I like everyone else more. Do you know what I mean? Well, he is the superhero. He's
doing what Mr. Incredible and Frozone is doing, listening to police scanners and trying to save the day, stop burglaries and robbings.
He's kind of his own, like, if you compare Luther to being Superman, of wanting to create the Justice League, Diego is Batman wanting to do it by himself.
You're right. And he is a dick. Like, starting off straight away, he was always a dick, and he was always he's kind of selfish, but always wanting to do the right thing. But he wants to do the right thing because he wants the glory. Not the glory to be rich and famous or anything like that, but he wants the praise.
He wants to be the superhero. He wants to be the hero of it all.
I like the idea where he's got some, not that this is a weakness for anyone, but his stutter, that he's trying as a child, he gets help from his mom, who's a robot in the family. He sees her as the motherly figure, and that's a nice and emotional attachment to see him in. Like, he's putting forth a surface level to be the hard guy, that no, he's got no emotions, that he's hard, that you're not going to see him cry, but he is a big child at heart. And one of the best things I think I love about Diego is that he secretly loves dancing. I think we're alone now. He shuts the doors so no one sees him dance, and he does the robot dance. And then in season 3, I can't decide if I think we're alone now is the best musical sequence, or if the Footloose is the best one. But
because that's all taking place in his head.
That's what he secretly wants. He wants to express himself in dancing, and with his family as well, to take part of it. And when he sees Luther and the other number 1, Marcus, in the Sparrow Academy start dancing off with each other, it's like Diego's taken back. Wait, what's happening? And Klaus is going, "Get him, Luther!" Like, it's like subconsciously this is what Diego wants, but he's taken aback. Wait, whoa! And they're all in sync of dancing together in formation. We're pretty good at this. And then he's loving it. I didn't realize this until a while after watching the episode, but that's all in his head, but that's what he wants. And that's never really expressed. He never gets to tell his family that. That's just something for us as the audience.
Yeah.
And while I can say that he's not my favourite throughout the series, I think he was in the final season. I think in season 4, I can't believe I'm saying this, I think Diego was my favourite part. Because, not to go into the arcs of the characters in the storyline, but I think he had one of the major developments.
He did, and that development started from seasons 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously introduced to his, air quotes, kid, presented to him by Lila. And he initially doesn't want any part of it. He's like, I don't know what to do with a kid. But he kind of rises to the challenge. You know, he changes his perception of it. And then so in the 4th season, he's ready to embrace that family life.
He's got a dad bod, and I love the part where he's loving the idea of returning to the superhero life.
But I think that's a kind of thing that all men in that age bracket, they think back to their glory days, you know. And
I like the mustache he rocks in the 4th season. They all have different various hairdos and hairstyles, but I like Diego was the one with the mustache. I don't know why, it suited him very well. But Diego was an interesting one because, of course, with the superhero complex, he lands in the mid to late 60s, and he
thinks I can save JFK, and is immediately thrown into an asylum.
Of course, he's the one. Yeah, the fact that he was thrown into an insane asylum, I thought that was the most suitable story establishment to go with him.
Yeah,
and I really like that. And he was devoted to it as well. I see what you mean when you say he's would be probably the least favourite, but I can't say I like anyone more or less. I like the rest on an even amount.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, I think maybe my least favourite could be number 3, Alison.
Okay, interesting. I think I really like Alison because I like the weight of her power. In terms of, you have a power where you can literally make anybody do anything that you want. And I think that in the first season, obviously we meet her where she is a celebrity and she has used her power to anything you want. But that, as a consequence, has had a bit of a strain on her family life. Yeah. Because she is kind of nearly not estranged, but she's kind of like
she's lost custody of her child.
Lost custody of Claire.
She's now in divorce of her husband Patrick.
Because it's so simple for her to rumour her daughter, and her husband walked in and it's like, you're using your superpowers to, you know, manipulate our daughter.
And that's why she started off not wanting to use them. And I like how in that first season, even though she got her throat cut by Vanya, she was still wanting to save her.
Yeah, it's not her fault. She's being manipulated.
Yeah.
She was always very, very caring sister when it came to Vanya.
But when she starts to receive some consequences in her life, mainly from season 3, when she realised that her daughter does not exist in the timeline she's restored in, that's when her villainy...
I think her motivations change. I wouldn't say villainy. I'd say her motivations were always to get back to Claire. Yeah. Her sister. Or her daughter, excuse me. I think that in season 2, when she was a civil rights activist, I was like, I love that. I think that really
I thought it was brilliant. And how alone she must have felt. She lands here, she can't speak. She's back in the 1960s, and she walks into the first diner, something that you do in nowadays, and all of a sudden you're showing a sign, whites only. How alone.
Huge culture shock, yeah. I was surprised that she got her voice back. I thought that because of the way that obviously her throat was cut with the violin string, I thought that it was going to be an interesting character development to go from a character whose powers specifically derive from her speaking to then becoming mute, and she would have to use sign language for the rest of the series. I thought that's the area they were going. I thought that was going to be really interesting. So she's essentially kind of depowered.
Yeah, I thought it was a great idea, and like this show filled with many great ideas. A lot of them not executed to the fullest potential as fans could hypothesize to be. But you know, it's not that I lingered on that thought. It was a good idea. I thought she died when she got her throat slit with the violin. I thought she did die, but look, that's just the story they went with, and you know, I moved on, accepted it straight away. Thor lost his eye in Thor Ragnarok. He got a new one in Avengers Infinity War. No biggie. But you're right, her motivations changed, and it went against the companionship with her family. When I said I hated Luther for what he did to Vanya, I hated Alison more, especially when she said to Victor, formerly Vanya, we should have never let you out of the vault. And I'm like, punch her, give her a slap. When you know the life that Victor has lived, I'm rooting for you to end the world. I feel for you, you know? Mm-hmm. And she does the right thing in the end, but then she's still perceived as the black sheep, the one who never, one of the few who doesn't come to family events because she's always perceived as the bad guy. And I started to respect her when she says, I'm done being viewed as the bad guy in this family, because Klaus then digs in on her for saving his life by giving him the marigold to save his life, but gets the powers back, and that sets him on his course. But I liked her in the end, and while I would have been saying to Victor, no, don't be going all apologetic on her. She was a bitch. Let her mope around in her sorrows and let her think about it. But put her in the thinking chair.
I don't know. I think that, like, I can see it from Alison's perspective as well, where in a situation where she's transported back in time and she's able to kind of live this life, she obviously had to make do. She's living there now.
Yeah.
And in her mind, Claire is in the future and she's still alive, whatever. When they are transported back to this new timeline, and then she finds out that by direct consequence of what Vanya did in the past, her daughter was never born, which essentially is that she died. This world is, in her view, the world is the same. The only thing that's different really is her daughter is no longer there. So in her mind, it's not an easy step. It's not as easy as going 1 = 2, but in her mind, Victor killed Claire. She's not alive because of what Victor did.
But then she put blame on, what was the kid's name in season 2, and he was an old man. It's not Elliot, because Elliot was the guy who was helping them out in the second season, and he was killed by the Swedes, which was an interesting thing. They introduce a character in some seasons, and they're like an assistant to the team, to the family, and they're the ones who get murdered over it.
It's Harlan.
I knew it was something I would remember upon hearing it. Harlan. She blamed Harlan for indirectly killing their mothers in this new timeline. So she killed Harlan. And that's one thing that's just wouldn't be... That's a bit unforgivable, and something that I thought was dropped a little too easily. But I'm not complaining about that. Like, at the end of the day, I'm watching the show for the characters, not the story. But Klaus is a good story.
I think, just to transition from Alison to Klaus, I think Alison and Klaus was one of my favourite relationships. And the only way that I can describe it was, have you ever seen Friends?
I know Friends.
Yeah.
I've seen some episodes, yeah.
I really enjoy when Chandler and Rachel would have storylines together, because they're not two characters I would have put together naturally, but when you put them together, I just really enjoy the chemistry that they have. Like the fact that in season 2, when Klaus and Alison, they're kind of the first two to meet, and
because
they're hugging
because of the tattoo sign she sees on one of his cultists, and of course Klaus starts a cult.
Exactly. That they're the first two to meet, and they're all hugs, and there's no badness, even though there was no badness, no reason for them not to.
They're the two closest out of the lot.
And they had that great scene with Vanya in the hairdressers.
I love that scene when they have their own little dance scene to themselves. Like let the girls party while the men do the grump work.
Exactly. And so then later on in season 4, when Klaus is the only one talking to Alison, he's living with her, that just seemed like a natural fit. Like it
was a natural fit. Like, she's a caring motherly figure to her, and he's the adolescent troubled individual who,
through no fault of his own kind of way. I think that his power and where he starts off are so interesting, that he is a drug addict, but specifically he's a drug addict to suppress his power. That he doesn't want to see the
that is an interesting element, to summon the dead, and then of course it progresses to being able to allow the dead to take over his body and to then discover he's immortal. And then
that's something I like, is that everyone's powers that were introduced in almost everyone's powers anyway in season 1,
just to a certain extent they progress,
develop and evolve to be more so than what they initially start with. And like that, that Klaus starts off with, he's able to speak to the dead, and then season 2 we see that he's able to, because you see it kind of in that battle at the start, that he's able to
summon an army of dead soldiers,
and that they would have some kind of tangible force within the world that they can, because you see Ben there obviously using his powers as a ghost, and then through that season that he's able to the ghosts are able to possess his body, and then we find out that he's immortal. So he's the most probably developed in terms of powers that we see multiple different facets of it.
When in the scene where Luther was killed and then they have no choice, they have to go to Obsidian, to the other side, and Reg leaves him behind. He's fulfilled his purpose. He's no use for him. For a guy who's always perceived as an idiot, real smart thinking, to not be wiped out of existence, he kills himself.
I'll kill myself. I'll go to this other place first.
And like, I thought that was so clever because it's the best option he has. Like, and it's quick thinking. It's a little bit, I'm not compared to Deadpool, but you know, like, he has risen. That type of situation. That when Klaus reappears, it's all fun and games. Even though he's a little reluctant, because once he died, he's like, well, okay, well, I died. I don't want to go back. But I really like that. And I felt that as well. Like, you lost 2 members of the family then and there. You know you're going to get them back, but I still felt the deaths.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really did like it. But, you know, as much as I like that Diego was sent to an insane asylum for trying to save JFK or warn about his assassination, I think the best story arc in each of the siblings, Klaus's was the best. Because he started a spiritual cult. Like how more perfect could you be?
I think it fit him really well, but I would actually disagree with you.
Really?
I would say specifically Klaus's best arc is when he is accidentally transported back in time and has to go through the Vietnam War.
I
agree. Falls in love with Dave. He falls in love with another soldier and then comes back. He's got PTSD for a war that he essentially spent a year fighting, but comes back 2 minutes after he went. So no time has passed at all. He has all this PTSD. And then in season 2, he gets transported back and he has the opportunity to speak to Dave before he goes to the war. And I think that's one of those then paradoxes of, if he convinces Dave not to go,
it's what causes him to go.
It's what caused him to go. But also, if he had succeeded and he didn't go, then Klaus would have never met him and never fallen in love with him, you know. And it's also then just I don't know about you, I thought that Klaus was, at the start of it, he was more flamboyant. I never really took him as being gay, but then I kind of took him as a flamboyant character, and then after his stint in Vietnam, okay, he's gay, and then as he went through the cult, oh no, he's bi. Or I would even nearly, at the end of it, I would say he's pansexual. He's just, he's into anything and everything.
I think in season 1 and season 4, his sexuality was near irrelevant. I think in season 2 and 3 it went from anything, but that guy would fuck anything. like here's something else, right, to describe what each member of the family is like. When 5 is telling them, what do you do when you come face to face with your doppelgangers? Diego says kill him. Klaus says sleep with him. How much more information would you need to understand what their characters are like? Whereas Luther in that scene would be, oh, doppelgangers, I know what that is.
Just completely, they're all on different levels, completely in the same conversation.
Yes, that is Klaus's best arc. I just said that the
cult fits him perfectly as well.
In terms of the setting, to start him where he is off, you know, where he starts off, it was great. And I did like that quite a bit. I'd imagine he'd be one of 2 of your favourite characters.
Yes, I think so.
So is the other favourite character
number 5? Yeah, I think 5. I love... This is a trope that doesn't happen very often, but I just love it so much.
I'm sure there are other examples to compare it to, but let's just not even bother try to think of it.
And it's that I love when a young actor is playing an older character, if that makes sense. Like a character that has gone through something, whether it be magic or time travel or something like that. The 2 examples I can give you are 5, in this obviously being a 60-year-old man he being played by a 13-year-old. And the other example I can give you is Matt Smith in Doctor Who, that he's playing a 900-year-old character and he's playing by a 25-year-old man. You know, it's this kind of gravitas, or this, I know so much more than it seems. And so I'm able to kind of speak eloquently, not like a regular 13-year-old, you know? And so I loved that 5 was like that, you know, that he wasn't just a teleporter. He was accidentally a 60-year-old man stuck in a 13-year-old's body. And he had that attitude of like, I can't believe I messed up the calculations. How do I get out of this body? I need to go back to being a 60-year-old man. Because I don't know, when I'm 60, if I had the option to go back to being in a 15-year-old body and live it all again, I'd be like, yeah, sure, you know. But he's like, I want to go back to being 60.
Well, in terms of him wanting to change back, I always thought, do you really want to be a 60-year-old man again? Like, he looks better as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he would have been a younger adult to be the same age as the rest of his siblings. But every time they're all together, I think 5 commands the screen.
He does, yeah, because he's the oldest.
He's the wisest. He proclaims himself when they're fighting the sparrows, I'm more like their ringer. He should be the leader.
Yeah.
Because, now, what flaws does 5 have? What weaknesses does he have? I think
he's arrogant.
He is arrogant, but is that a main weakness?
I think so. I think he's blinded by his own arrogance. He's like, my way is the correct way. You have to do whatever I say.
You're right in that regard. He often does a lot of things by himself, and he just leaves by himself.
Yeah, and we'll come back 3 days later, and, you know, the gang is like, oh, how close, you know, did you stop the apocalypse? No. You know, and it's like he goes off on his own thing thinking he can do it and comes back and is like, okay, I've lost 3 days of time.
But he's always trying. When they were trying to leave the 60s in 90 minutes, like, he was trying to gather everyone together. He's trying to collect them. When he goes to Diego, he was happy to see him. He didn't want him to do anything to change the timeline, so he has him stay there and says, I'll come back for you later. And I like the fact that he's not going to leave his family behind. Like, he comes back and he's like, yeah, nothing to talk about. I've only been gone for like 17 years, but 17 years to them, but how many years it was for him. But he's got nothing to talk to them, no catch up, no socialization, none of that regard. Like, he only gets to really sit down and rest and enjoy himself in the 3rd season, because he doesn't wear his suit, he doesn't wear his uniform, he's wearing normal clothes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, seasons 1, 2, and 3 all take place over the course of 3 weeks.
Yeah,
you know, so he is constantly moving from apocalypse to apocalypse to apocalypse. But in season 3, yeah, he comes in and they kind of, that's the first chance that he really gets to sit back. You know, there's no immediate danger, because season 1 comes in, immediately apocalypse. Season 2 comes in, immediately apocalypse. Season 3, there's no immediate apocalypse, so
it's coming.
It's coming. He doesn't know that yet. We know it as an audience, but he doesn't know it yet. So that's when he's finally able to actually, you know, take a break, relax for a minute or two.
I want to give a shout out to Aidan Gallagher.
Yeah, I think that he is worth taking a moment to appreciate, because in a room full of actors who are 10, 15 years his senior.
Yeah, they've more experience in
he holds his own in every scene. There's no scene where I'm thinking like, oh, this is bad child acting or anything like that. I think he steals the show. I think he is, for me, the main character.
He is the biggest draw. If you were to lose a character in the show, which I would refuse to have. I would refuse to accept a character to die off and not come back. When I say a character, I mean the main family. He is by far the one you cannot lose. And that his powers to progress the story, time traveling and teleporting, doesn't even factor into it. And you know, the fact when they all come face to face to their father, Hargreaves, I like the 5, who's essentially nearly the same age as him, that he's the one who's always having a one-on-one conversation. And I like how he's always trying to keep ahead, like he's always being wary. Like when he's calling Hargreaves out, I saw you talking to someone. Who are you talking to, making a deal? And Hargreaves trying to deny it. It's like, yes, 5, yes, get him. I just really like that quite a lot. And I think throughout seasons 1 and 2 and 3, he's my favourite. 100% he's my favourite. But I said earlier in season 4, Diego. Yeah. And I never thought I would say that.
I don't know if I really liked 5's arc in season 4, specifically with the relationship he developed with Lila.
Well, do you want to talk about her next?
She's not chronologically next, but yeah, let's talk about her. I thought that was an interesting way to introduce her as a character, that she is one of the other 43 children that wasn't chosen to be, or she wasn't given up by her parents.
But she was welcome addition to the family. Like Max from Stranger Things, introduced in season 2, and probably the most beloved favourite character by season 4.
Yeah.
There's an argument for Lila to be something similar to that in the sandbox of this show. And I liked how, from season 2, I think, to most definitely season 3, with 5 and Lila, especially with Lila's fighting 5 in the sauna room, and I like the fact that these two can match each other in hand-to-hand combat. Especially, like, she can do it with anyone, because she can mimic her powers.
Mimic powers, yeah. I thought initially, I didn't realise that she was mimicking powers. I thought that it was like that she had been given all of the powers of all of them. Do you know what I mean? But it did seem like towards I think it was maybe season 3 where it became more obvious that she can mimic the power, but only really of someone around her.
Yeah.
You know, like it,
like Alison saying, "I heard a rumor," and Lila reciprocates that back by finishing the sentence.
Yeah, but she's only using their own powers against them. It's not like she's coming up against Alison and she's teleporting behind her or anything like that. It's maybe like only someone, whoever's in the most immediate proximity, she can mimic their powers.
Yeah, and it's like how I think Alison's rumor can wear off if like she says to someone, "I heard a rumor you stopped moving," but as soon as Alison is taken away, saved by 5 in that scene,
they're able to move again.
Yeah.
But, so there are limits to it.
But, you know, in this regard, Lila introduced as an ally to Diego, like how Ben is an ally to Klaus, that, she's with the villain, but she was manipulated herself, and therefore she starts to slowly but gradually be interplaced in the family and be accepted as one of the siblings, essentially. And I like it. I like how she has that relationship with Diego. You know, I don't know what to compare it to, but you know, they're essentially a family, but she's with Diego, similar to how Luther was with Alison at one point.
I didn't like that they dropped that.
I do acknowledge that it was something that they had and they could have continued to explore it, but dropping it,
I didn't like that they dropped it in favour of Luther getting with your one in the Sparrows.
Sloan.
Yeah. Because that was just like immediate. That was all of a sudden. It just felt too quick. Whereas I felt him and Alison had a bit of a history.
Yeah.
And I can understand his hesitance maybe after season 2 where she had gotten married to the other fella. And maybe she wasn't over that.
But that connection was still there.
But I would have liked to see the connection last throughout. You know, I would have liked that more than...
Rather than just being completely abandoned.
By the end of it, it was...
Or in the opposite effect, how... A lot of people are not liking the apparent sudden, but I think there were breadcrumbs sprinkled throughout 5 and Lila's potential relationship. Now a lot of people aren't liking it, and my opinion is, I think I'm just neutral in it, because I'm not advocating for the story to be the best thing possible, because I'm not watching this show for the story, and I didn't say that in the first 2 seasons, but I say it now in hindsight. I'm watching the show for the characters, and whatever the characters do, they can do, so long as it's not horrible or bad, because it's who they are. And I just love them interacting with one another and then having their own solo adventures. And I think the height of it, those solo adventures, was in season 2. I don't know where the best of their ensemble collaboration was, but there are many of them. So I'm neutral with Lila and 5.
I think with the Lila and 5 relationship, I think that I can understand parts of it, but I can't understand other parts of it. And what I mean by that is, if you were stuck in a situation for 6 years with anybody, you would eventually either kill each other or develop feelings for the other person. The only thing is that I think that where they started off, where she in previous seasons had hated him for killing her parents, I think that even though she had come to terms with that and they got on with each other and they were civil and they treated each other like siblings, I think that for her would have been too much of a barrier to where they ended up, where they were getting together and they were in love with each other. So I think that
regardless of the strain she was developing with Diego as a married
regardless
couple,
of that, I think that where those 2 characters had previously been, the history between those 2 characters doesn't fit in with where they ended up. But that's, you know, it's
But I just remain neutral, and I'm not gonna complain about it, because I don't want to complain about it. Like, there's many things in the show I don't like because I just think they're poor decisions. But
that one's not one for you.
Well, I can say I would rather not have it. I would rather them to maintain that relationship as they had from seasons 2 to 3 to the first half of 4, because they're working together as partners to intercept the keepers, as like they work colleagues, as spies. I think I would rather that. I would rather it, actually.
I'd rather them develop into a Klaus-Alison relationship where they work together and get on, as opposed to what they ended up
as. And I would
as.
have much more favoured Diego and Lila's relationship to
stay strong, even though it has its faults.
Regardless of where it ends, but just to stay there and remain in that sandbox.
I
did like her laser eyes, though.
That was an interesting
I wasn't going to question it. I wasn't going to question why is she the only one who has the most different superpower from her original one, whereas the rest of them, while their powers might have developed into elevated versions, whereas her is that's just a completely new power. I wasn't going to question that.
I think I only questioned it because she got the laser eyes. Fair enough. Okay, there's no guarantee that you would always get the same powers again.
But she still has the mimic.
I think if she only had the laser eyes, that would have been good. Or even more interesting, I think it would have been more interesting if somehow in the final season some of them had swap powers. And them having to kind of like in Fantastic Four, the second Fantastic Four, where Johnny is able to swap powers and seeing them deal with each other's powers, that would have been interesting. But it's not something I dwelled too long on.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ideas that should have, could have, would have been, and that is, I think I actually would have actually liked to see that. Like, imagine Luthor trying to use Diego's powers to throw knives and control the trajectory of the knives thrown.
I don't even think that. I think, what if Klaus had to deal with that, and what if Luthor had to deal with Allison's rumors? And what if it was Allison then that had to throw the knives? I think that really mixed them up and go with the complete opposite.
Or to even see the likes of Diego use Five's powers.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, dude, he would.
Yeah, or see a bulky Five,
Yeah, that would be funny. But it's not what they did. So
it's nice to think about. Like, I think, like you're saying there earlier on, a lot of interesting ideas not executed because they in favor went in other routes, you know. Someone then, I think, really interesting, number 6, Ben.
Which one?
Yeah, there's 2 that we could talk about. So obviously season 1 and 2 we have original Ben.
Nice Ben.
Who is a ghost. He is dead from season 1 episode 1. He's been dead from the start. And
has the majority of screen time with Robert Sheehan as Klaus.
Yeah, and I think that I really like that was the entryway for Ben, that he's a missing part of the puzzle, but still there.
Yeah.
Presumably he can still hear everything that's going on and see everything that's going on.
He does, yeah.
He's just in the back, and because Klaus he is dulling his senses, he's not wanting to hear Ben, he's not wanting to hear the other ghosts and stuff.
Yeah, that's why in a group, mostly in season 1, Ben is only with Klaus, but when they're all together, Ben's not even really there because Klaus has not acknowledged him. In season 2,
he doesn't even tell the others that Ben is with them.
No,
like you'll have Ben behind him, like tell them this.
Yeah,
and he's like not saying anything. He's ignoring him.
And I think that makes a great dynamic for of all the characters to commune with the dead. That it's Klaus because of his personality, because of him wanting to suppress his powers, him being an addict, him being a troublesome, flamboyant wild card, that he's the one that Ben is stuck with. Like, how more effective would it have been if Ben was stuck with Vanya or Victor or with Luthor?
Someone that would actually include him in everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Just imagine like being paired up with your worst sibling and just, one of those situations. But he did progress more, and he did have a role to fulfill in the second season, and that's where his arc ended. And he was the nice guy. He was the nice one out of them all.
He was, absolutely.
And there was a lot of mystery surrounded with him that I didn't think they were going to explore.
They didn't have to, yeah. It's like we got breadcrumbs each season leading up to season 4 when we finally found out how he had
And I still didn't feel like we needed to know.
No,
It was obviously a part of the main story in concluding the show, but if they had come up with nearly an entirely different story for the 4th and final season, which is not included in the comics because the comics is still ongoing, I would have been happy to have known that all the information you have is that Klaus says to Ben, what happened to you was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible accident.
In the same way that we were saying about like interesting ideas, I think that I disliked season 3 Ben so much that I thought when Allison rebooted the universe, when she rebooted everything, that she wouldn't have brought Sparrow Ben, that she would have brought original Ben back. And I thought that would have been interesting to have original Ben back, but obviously he had never died. So let's say he was just kind of carrying on, and the others would have experienced a world where he had died. So they would still have that memory of Reggie killing their original Ben, but this was another version, because it's just strange that Allison brought forward Sparrow Ben when that's not really
But she
the same
didn't.
then.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was mixing up with the end of season 2 into 3.
No, yeah.
But it's
3 to 4.
yes, that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Like-
I think there are many questions that are unanswered in the show, and I think I'll just roll it up in a ball that Ben, the mean Ben, was there, and because himself, the source of him as a human being, was part of the original team in the original timeline. That is why he followed through. Whether Alison specifically chose him or not, she just chose who was in the room because that's who they are. And that's why he was kept there, whereas Sloane was not from the original team. Therefore, I guess that's why she's not existing in the time, which is something that was just not really explored much. And I would agree, not a great decision choice. Similar to how she brought back Ray from the 60s, which was, I think, a big mistake because not only it didn't make sense, how could it? They just didn't do anything with it. Same with how they... I don't know if you noticed, season 3 had a post-credit scene.
I didn't know that, actually. No, I don't think I've seen that.
Little quick thing. After they realise they don't have the powers, they all disperse, some happy, some not. There is a Ben variant sitting in a subway train in Seoul. And
Wow.
it's assumed that that is the nice Ben that was born powerless, but was never adopted.
Wow,
And
okay.
he's got glasses, he's reading a book, he's smiling.
I didn't know that. I'm
And
going to have to rewatch this. Yeah.
It's just a quick scene. And I thought, wow, we're going to have 2 different Bens. We're going to have a nice Ben who's not
That would
experienced.
also be interesting. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we're going to have the mean Ben. And they just did nothing with it. Literally nothing with it. You can say it means this, but they never mentioned it. And so it's not up to me or you to determine what that means and how it affects the 4th season and the apocalypse there. You introduced it. You have to follow through it. If you don't, it's one of the many, and the show has many, flaws, errors and mistakes and weaknesses it has. But, as I said, I'm not watching the show for the story. I'm watching it for the characters. And I liked Mean Ben just as much as Nice Ben. Not more, just as much. Because they're as nice as the season 1 and 2 Ben is. It's equivalent to the meanness of the season 3 and 4 Ben. But there's a reason behind it. When Sloane asks him, why are you being such a dick? I think he wants to be the leader of the team.
Yeah.
When it's just him and Sloane left, he says, well, it's all I have. But he says that to himself. He doesn't get to express himself. And
But even in season 4, when the Sparrows are all gone and the only people he has now are the Umbrella Academy, he's still reluctant to be a part of the family, even though they're the only thing that he has left.
yeah, and he, when they all gather in that little rusted up family truck that Diego has, he's like, let's go kill this bitch. Like he wants to get back into the superhero action just as much as Diego, but Ben he's an asshole about it. Whereas Diego, you know, he's matured much more, you know. And sometimes I like to compare them. Like, imagine putting Mean Ben, Diego, and Klaus in the same room together, and just what would the dialogue be? Like, they're all different. If anything, Diego of all of them would be the most moral straight man in that situation, you know. So I liked Mean Ben, and I don't really have much to say on how it concluded with his arc in relation to the apocalypse of season 4. But I do wish that the actor, Justin H.M., I believe is the actor. I do wish he was on set, on screen, in the room with the others in the final scene. Because I would have known that the actor was on set that day, and I just would have liked that.
Yeah.
You know? I just like to see them all together. And even though he was always a puzzle that was not in the overall piece, he was still there. He's just outside of it.
Yeah.
And he slowly came back in, and it was a great idea to introduce a Mean Ben. I thought that was a great idea, even though his cameo scene at the end of season 2 to his scene in start of season 3, completely obvious hairdo. His hair is slicked forward, covering his half of his forehead in the end of season 2, and in season 3 it's just completely slicked back. Just not acknowledged. 2 years later.
Yeah. They probably hadn't written it yet that it was going to be, that Ben was going to be a part of the Sparrows as well.
let's move on.
Yeah. Our final member then of the team is number 7, who in the first 2 seasons referred to as Vanya, in the second 2 seasons referred to as Victor. I think Victor is one of the most interesting characters because, I don't know about you, I don't think I've ever seen another television show where the actor's transition in real life is displayed then in the show itself and is a part of the character arc. I genuinely don't know if I've seen it in anything else. And obviously with Elliot Page transitioning and the character then going from Vanya to Victor, I thought it was so interesting to see that actually take place on screen. And I thought also it's a very, very positive way that they handled it, in that Victor transitions, they go and they get their new haircut and they come out and they essentially kind of tell each of the members of the family one by one. Or I think even Klaus says oh, you've changed your hair, and he says, yeah, this is, who I am now. And it's very simple. All right, cool. And they just move on.
Yeah.
And there's no dwelling on it. There's no confusion. There's no, from any member.
There's no animosity.
No animosity. There's no, there's no badness in any of them. They just accept him for who he is. And I thought that was just a really great way of seeing a transition take place in world. You know what I mean?
Spoken well, true words, David.
I think it's a sensitive topic.
It is a sensitive topic, and I have a few things to say myself. One, no, I don't think there has been a depiction on screen like that. None that I've watched, and I'm happy that there is now precedent for it.
Yeah,
it's happened.
I think precedent is set. You're right. That's a great way to say it. And then as well as that, Netflix have also set a precedent where afterwards they've gone back and they've change the credits. It's no longer Ellen Page, it's Elliot Page. And I think that's a great way of standing by your actor as well, and confirming their identity.
I didn't realise that until I rewatched a few.
You rewatched it, yeah.
And wow, that's actually really cool, I thought. The transition from identifying as a female to a male, it's of no consequence to the story they were telling, and as a result, it did not change a thing, really.
No.
What it did change that I would have liked I had an issue with. They're of the same level of issue I had with other elements with this show that we've already spoken about. One being that at the time, Vanya she's referred to as the violinist, or the violin in the comics, and how she used her power through the violin. And as we progress through the show, that's just dropped. Except for in season 4, where it's just briefly mentioned by Hargreaves' wife.
I thought initially, that when Vanya used the power, that it was only accessible when she played music.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of her thing. The same way that Alison was restricted by saying, I heard a rumour. She has to say that in order for her power to work. I thought that Vanya had to be playing the violin.
And I'm happy that that character can use their power without an instrument. But the fact that they were making a career of playing the violin, I just would have liked to have seen that not dropped, like with the relationship with Luther and Alison. Don't drop it. So I have an issue with that, but to the same level as the relationship with that. So the transition with Vanya to Victor, I don't want the hassle or a storyline to develop of whoa, we have an issue with this. There's no time for that in this show, and there's no need for it.
There was no need for it. I don't think that any of the characters that we had already been introduced to would have had a problem with it. So there was no need to manufacture a problem with it.
They told the story they wanted to tell, and I like it. I like the development that character has on screen and off screen for the actor, Elliot Page. I like it all the best because at the end of the day, they're still powerful.
Yes, and the most powerful.
Yes,
that so much so that Reggie had to suppress their powers.
Yeah, that's still the same character, and that backstory with that character, how that character was suppressed with their powers growing up, and Victor in the 4th season really lays it out to Hargreaves, even though it's not the same version of Hargreaves. They have their explosion.
Yeah.
In
their catharsis. They're finally letting it all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I like, even if it was still Vanya throughout the whole show, Vanya still would have played out the storyline as such.
Yes.
It's just this transition happened in life, and so they accommodated it. I remember when Elliot Page transitioned, I thought, that's interesting. So what are they going to do for the Umbrella Academy? Because I thought, so is he going to still play Vanya? And it would have been ridiculous if they just started off season 3
and not acknowledged anything.
And just do away with the long hair and whatnot. And like the fact that Elliot Page still went on set to wear the hair and makeup as Vanya to accommodate some screen time to implement that transition on screen. And when that happened, great. Delighted we have that. Now let's move on to the story.
Yeah.
And that is the end of it all. Literally the character did what they were going to do if it was still Vanya.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And I was rooting for Vanya to destroy the world, and I was rooting for her in season 2 to fuck Luther and fuck the rest of them if they come against you. Tell them off, because you were isolated and excluded in your upbringing. You were drawn a marker off the Umbrella logo on your wrist while the rest of them got tattoos. And you do you, and you come up top of it. And then
I did like that they were the person that essentially kicked off the apocalypse multiple times. I like that kind of idea that even though the problems always stem from Vanya, that they as a team or they as a family were still holding on to her and like, no, like she's still part of the family. So, but I'm glad then that they moved away from that in seasons 3 and 4, that Victor isn't the direct cause of the apocalypse, because I think that would have gotten boring having seen it multiple times.
And I appreciate that as well. And I like how even Victor in the 4th season, when they start gaining their powers, or they remember the truck scene where they all start vomiting baby shark to do, which I really like that scene, that Victor was starting to energize and blew out the windows. Like, just don't Hulk out.
Don't go too far. We know what happens when you go too far.
So that's still the same character. No difference whatsoever. So I'm happy with it. I do think that character went from the lead billing name or protagonist to literally being part of the ensemble.
I think you're right. I think that when it started, because we were led to believe that they didn't have any powers, that
she was the standout.
They were the surrogate for us as the audience. But then over the course, it did become more of an ensemble.
Like I can't even tell you who's the lead in the 4th season. 5, Victor. I can't tell anymore.
I think it is an ensemble. There is no lead, and I think that the only reason that the credits wouldn't come up with all 7 names at once is because the rest of it you can't do.
You can't do that. And Elliot Page was the billing.
I think they are the most famous of all of the cast anyway. So
you're right. I'm happy with the show because of the characters. I love the characters so much. It didn't matter what storyline they were going to do.
I felt that any kind of apocalypse or any kind of actual plot was irrelevant to what was going on. I think that if you had, say, taken the apocalypse of season 3 but put it into season 2 and swapped them, that it wouldn't have made much of a difference, because I just like seeing these characters interact with one another. And
you just want to hang out with
you want to hang out with them. Yeah, exactly. So,
and that was always the main draw for me. I don't care about what storyline they're going with, like, so long as it's
engaging and
entertaining and decent and fine. I'm happy with that. Just bring me back to the characters. Show me what new developments you're going to put them through. Show me some interactions and collaborations and pairings off that you're going to do. I love it when they're on their solo adventures, but I love it when they're coming together, especially with the picture that they all get together at the phone booth. Like, none of them want the picture. Some cover their eyes, some are going no, and Diego hugs Ben sarcastically, and when Luther takes that picture, there's like the reverse screenshot of him taking that picture. Obviously it's apparently you can do it with an iPhone, but not with that picture he took. I like that they're all together as a family. I love that. I like that. It's nice, and it's a bit bittersweet, and I don't have a problem with the ending. I don't have a problem that in a non-traditional way that we're not used to as audiences, watching major TV shows come to conclusion that would be fulfilling as an ice cream with chocolate. We don't get that here. They die. They're erased from existence. They're a sacrifice preventing the world from the apocalypse indefinitely. And I don't have a problem with it.
I think the only problem I'd have is that I obviously want to see them get that happy ending.
Well, of course you do. And I want that too. But
it's a happy ending for the world, but not for them. But I'm glad that they got to go out together.
It's bittersweet. Like, they have that little commune together. If anything, I don't like it because Ben is not there.
Well, Ben is the monster that gets them.
I said earlier I wanted the actor on set. I want to see him there.
I know, yeah.
So I like how to remain consistent with our characters. Luther, do you want to go around in a circle and say last few words of what we love or of honesty or whatnot? And everyone says, no, come on, yeah. but and like, we're all having a little chit chat, and Lila says, I'm glad to be part of the family. I forget what everyone else says. And Klaus says, I love you guys, but you're all assholes. Like, it's all consistent with it, and it's bittersweet. Yeah, do I want them to have that happy end? Of course I do. I don't want them all to die. I'm after following them since 2019. But because I'm not watching this for the story to execute its ending in the way I want Avengers Endgame to execute its ending.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah,
I'm watching this show for the characters, and the characters made their final heroic act together as a family. And I don't want the boys to end like that. I expect the boys to end in a much more higher standard of conclusion.
Triumphant ending.
Yeah, a triumphant ending. And this is triumphant or sacrificial. It's just bittersweet.
I think it's bittersweet. You've nailed it on the head. Yeah,
and it's nice, and I like this. And I didn't have a problem with it. I'm happy it got its ending.
Yeah. Same. A problem with Netflix shows is that they get a cancellation. They don't get an ending. So I like that there is bookends on this, that you can start this and end this and know you're getting a complete story. Yeah. And I do appreciate that, absolutely.
What was your favourite musical sequence?
The show obviously well known for its musical sequences. I did like I Think We're Alone Now, and that is stuck in my head.
I think that is the most iconic.
It is.
When I hear that song, I think of that.
But I do consistently go back to the Footloose sequence.
How often have you gone back to watch or even listen to it?
I'll be honest with you. In the years leading up to watching The Umbrella Academy, I had already seen that sequence about 10 times. Because I just would watch it on YouTube. I just like this sequence. I'd never seen the show before.
So you've watched that scene out of context, not knowing who these characters are or why. Nope. Not questioning why one's got a cowboy hat, why one is a child. And interesting.
Just completely out of context.
Have you hypothesized?
Yeah, it's one of those shows.
Have you thought about what is this show about based on this one musical sequence you've watched to then watching the pilot episode and the show?
Through osmosis, I knew certain things, but also I was completely off with other things. Specifically, I remember when it first came out. I remember seeing Pogo. Yeah. Someone we didn't even touch on. Obviously the. We super smart ape.
We briefly mentioned him. I did earlier.
Did you?
I did.
Okay, well,
you'll have to listen back now.
I will have to listen. I thought that initially that he was their adoptive father. I thought that their adoptive father had put his consciousness into an ape, and I thought that was something.
You get those all the time, though. Like a thought that you think, but then it's 100% not the case, and you forget all about it.
Yeah, I knew that Five had travelled, that all of the rest of them were older and he was younger. I knew that he had time travel capacity. I didn't know that he had teleportation. But then just through osmosis as well, I knew that they had a situation where they would jump timelines, that they would change universes. Now, I didn't know they do that every single season, but I knew that they had done that between seasons 1 and 3.
What's through osmosis?
Like, just like you've never seen the film or the show before, but you just know it through hearing other people talk about it.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Every day is a school day. I agree. I've gone back to listen or watch to the Footloose because it's the most collaborative, it's the most engaging, it's the most fun, and it's probably the longest. I love it. The most iconic is that I Think We're Alone Now, and if The Last of Us can be a classic in 11 years, then I Think We're Alone Now in The Umbrella Academy can become a classic too.
Yeah.
That scene. And so, if anything, 2 of the 7 characters, or 8 characters, 5, Ben and Lila, are not in that sequence in I Think We're Alone Now. Do you know, little fun fact, when they announced season 2 during COVID, they had the actors self-record themselves mimicking the dance sequence.
Oh, I didn't know that. And they did like a Zoom call.
No,
thing,
it's like no talking. They're just filming themselves in their homes, white background, mimicking or repeating their dance movements in the lead up of announcing season 2. Confirmed. And the actor who played 5 was among it, and the actor who played Ben was among it, and they played I Think We're Alone Now.
Nice.
So that capitalized on that song, and I really like that. And I was waiting for a musical scene in the opening of season 4, but all we got is the bad touch, you know, you and me, baby.
Yeah.
And I like that sequence. I like it. I'll probably think about that now when I hear that song. But yeah, I'm happy with that. Well, by the way, I just love Luther doing his dance move with the crab claws and going from left to right. It's like that's his signature move all the time. Every time he's part of a dance, he does that. And another question I want to ask you: if you were to dance like one of them, who would you be closest to?
You've obviously watched this dance a lot more. I wouldn't have watched.
I would be 100% be doing the Luther dance, because that's just the closest I can dance. He just drums his arms like that. Like the lobster claw is the most iconic. But I like that. I have one last question, David. One last question, or a 2-parter. Which is your favorite superpower, and which one would you want?
Oh, I think the one I would want would probably be Alison's.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's just like, you know, it's kind of like mind control, you know, just being able to tell, like, you know, get whatever you want, essentially. But I think the coolest, I think that the way that they used 5s was probably the coolest, just because it wasn't ever a situation where they used it, like, the way that they would use 5's powers made sense within the scene itself. Like, if it made sense for 5 to teleport across the room and back, they would do that. He wouldn't walk across the room and come and get things. He was always using the power. There was no kind of expense spared on like, okay, well, we have to limit how many times we can do this for budget constraints. I just thought that they never spared a use of the power when it made sense. So I think that they could have, definitely, it could have very easily been a show where the only time that you get to see anyone's powers would be in the first episode and the last episode, you know? Whereas throughout, because of 5's powers and Vanya's and Victor's, anytime that the scene called for them to use powers, they used it. Because essentially, Luther, Diego, Allison, and Klaus, all of their powers don't have any kind of physical need or much special effects.
They're a friend to the budget.
A friend to the budget. The only thing you need to do is kind of whiten Alison's eyes and echoes through her voice. So I think personally I would have liked Alison's powers, and but I enjoyed seeing how they used 5's powers. What about you?
5 and 5.
5 and 5. Okay.
Yeah.
For the same reasons?
Ever since Nightcrawler. Ever since Jumper.
X2, yeah, sorry. Not Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal. You're talking X-Men,
No, X-Men Nightcrawler, and then Jumper with Jamie Bell and Hayden Christensen. Yeah, I want to be a teleporter.
Yeah.
That's the coolest thing ever. I'd be happy without the time travel. Probably that, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that very much.
Have you got a recommendation before we let these good people go?
In lieu of Netflix, a show that has concluded in the guts of 3 seasons consisting of 8 episodes each, I think, David, you should at some point start to watch Sweet Tooth. Yeah. I've recommended it before, and I'm going to recommend it again, because we got season 1, and then we had to wait a year, and 2 years I think actually, and then we got season 2, but immediately the following year we got season 3. I told you what this is about. I'll remind you and the folks. It's about in a post-apocalyptic, but not in a explosion, fiery one, where humans are now being born as hybrids with animalistic features. So we follow Gus, who is a deer boy, and he's raised in the woods by his father, and he goes on an adventure with Nonzo Anozi, who to him plays Big Man, essentially a found father, found child type of relationship. And he wants to find his mom, and Big Man is looking for redemption, and there are many characters on the that we go through along the way, and we start to get introduced to more hybrid characters, and it's interesting to see the prosthetics on these characters with animalistic facial features and such. And it's a good show, and I think it's one to watch, especially knowing we have an ending. And it's it'd be PG-13, but not for the younger children.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Very well produced, executive produced by Robert Downey Jr. So I think it's a good show to watch. That's it.
Brilliant. I'm going to recommend Kneecap, which is a movie. It is about the band Kneecap, not band, but a hip hop rap group. It's spoken in predominantly the Irish language, but it's got subtitles, don't worry. But it's about their formation, and they're a group that grew up in West Belfast. So a lot of a divide. It's after the Troubles, so it's more so about the effects, well, not the effects of the Troubles, but their sentiments towards British people and how they want to keep the Irish language alive, and they do that through rap and through hip hop.
After watching this movie, I think there's no excuse now. You have to screen this as part of secondary school education.
I think so too, and it was one that I wasn't too excited about. Our friend and friend of the show, Roisin, she recommended it. She was like, yeah, I'm really excited for this film. Went to see it. I think it was one of the funniest movies of the year. I think I laughed more at Kneecap than I did at Deadpool and Wolverine, honestly. So I'm excited to watch it again. I'm excited to talk about it in our year-end review when I can go a bit more into detail into it, because I think it'll definitely be appearing there once or twice.
I give it 5 stars.
Yeah.
It is the funniest movie of the year.
It's worth it. It's definitely worth watching. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Talking Pictures Podcast. Make sure to join us next week, where we have a very special episode. We're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking again about another TV show. We're going to be talking about House of the Dragon seasons 1 and 2, but we're going to be joined by 2 guests. We're going to be joined by Nathan and Lawrence from Another Happy Pod and Still Got Legs. They're going to be joining us for this next episode of House of the Dragon, and we're going to be joining them actually this Friday. We'll be joining them for their X-Mania. We're going to be talking about X-Men First Class. So we'll have links to that on our social medias and all, so you can make sure to listen to them.
Lawrence called me out.
He did, yeah.
He called me out for not listening to his podcast.
Yeah, so you're going to have to... We're recording this before we've recorded our joint one with them, so we're going to be having scraps on that, so make sure to listen to that on Friday. But
fists in the air.
Fists in the air through Zoom across oceans. But yeah, no, we've new episodes every single Wednesday, so make sure that you're joining us for those, as well as bonus episodes every other weekend. Make sure that if you have any suggestions or topics for those bonus episodes, send them in to talkingpicturespodcast1@gmail.com.
Or don't. We're not running out of ideas.
No, that's fine. Make sure that you are subscribed to us on all of your social medias. They're all down below. We have Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, LinkedIn, as we said at the top of the show. And yeah, thanks so much for joining. Brian, any final words?
Well done, David. We now have finally done our first entire series chat on this podcast.
That is true. That's a good point.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Brian.